On the show today, I'm very excited. I've been looking forward to this for the last few weeks. There's an amazing park, which a lot of us will know, at Callan. It's called Callan Park. It's at Rozelle. I spend a lot of time there. I'm always walking there, wandering through. It's an amazing park. And we're lucky enough to have Roslyn Burge, who's from the Friends of Callan Park. And we've also got Heather Jones from Dark Tales. They are both here as my guests today, and we're going to be finding out more about Callan Park and about why it is such an amazing place. So Roslyn and Heather, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Tell us about, I guess, the Friends of Callan Park and what got you involved, Roslyn, in the Friends of Callan Park.
Well, Friends of Callan Park were formed at the end of '98, really, when Bob Carr and the Labor government wanted to sell off part of the site to make a 200 for a Scalabrini brothers who wanted to build a 200-bed retirement home. So a decade before that, Bob Carr had talked about how terrible it was to sell off public assets. And Callan Park is an amazing public asset that belongs to us all. And so the community really responded with a huge vigilance for the site. So there were rallies over the next couple of years, big battles. The government really wanted to sell it off for 1,200 home sites.
Yeah.
And that's an issue today, a contemporary issue in public debate. But, public assets like green spaces are far too important to just be disposed of. Jean Lennane was the first president, and Hall Greenland's the president now. But, we've had a huge following over the years. And I think it's that injustice of selling off public land is one aspect of it, but also the beauty of the site.
Yeah.
And also the third plank is mental health. And Friends of Callan Park have consistently sought for first of all, the retention when the hospital was still there, but now the reintroduction of the contemporary mental health services at Callan Park, which can be run. I've just been to Belgium, and I went to not even a former, it's lowered the extent of services, but an asylum in Ghent. They have outpatient services. Callan Park, there are buildings there laying empty which could provide those services as well.
Yeah,
so there's a whole raft of issues. But, you talk about the landscape. The Dutch also talk about vitamin G, there is no vitamin G, but G for green, and the value of that for us all.
Definitely.
And you can still, at Callan Park, see the topography and the landscape of a colonial and pre-colonial site, because it's barely been changed, that whole hillside down from Balmain Road.
Yeah. And what do you think makes Callan Park sort of such a significant site, I guess historically and culturally as well for the community?
Well, it's when it was first constructed, all the sandstone for those big sandstone buildings came off the site, and it was really built. The first gelignite went off in April 1880, and it was finished by 1885. So that first suite of sandstone buildings. So those are really extraordinary, beautiful buildings that could be repurposed. They're sitting there empty now. The Sydney College of the Arts went in there. But also I think we can't lose sight of the fact that all across Callan Park, not only does it have a First Nations history, but thousands of people have been cared for. It's a site that's complex with a dark history, a bright history. There are people who find it a place of respite and care. But that history shouldn't be lost. It's not just a place to gidify and play sport and kick a ball and walk your dog. It's much more. That history is so important to the whole community.
What are your thoughts on sort of that and bringing that history to life?
Well, yes, Callan Park has a very, very long history, and as with all large-scale mental institutions, there were people that potentially weren't doing the right thing, and I will touch on that in my tour. But beyond that, the history of Callan Park is very significant. So it was built in the age of the moral hygiene period for mental health. The main sandstone buildings that Roslyn referred to as a Kirkbride complex, which was a standard of care where patients would cycle through these big block buildings. They'd come in through the main entrance and eventually, hopefully, all being well, end up back out where they came in. And they would have outdoor activities, good hard work, good nourishment along the way to help them regain their mental faculties. And going forward into the 1960s, you can see the buildings that were arranged then when drug-based psychiatric care was really coming in. So you've got all of those buildings, and you've also got a significant site on the other side of the site, which is Broughton Hall, which was one of the leading psychiatric care facilities for returned servicemen from World War I. So a rich timber merchant family called the Langdons actually let the government buy this house, Broughton Hall, and they used it for several years. And what was the guy's name who ran it? Dr. Sidney
Evan Jones.
Evan Jones, yes, and he basically helped establish these wonderful gardens where the patients could actually work through their issues through the beauty of horticulture. And so there's a Japanese garden there. I don't know how many people know if there's a Japanese garden at Callan Park.
We've wandered around it. It's quite pretty. It's very cool.
So it's amazing amounts of surprises there.
It must be important to have the community, as on your side, as part of your, part of your team almost.
People have rallied. They've come to meet politicians.
Yeah.
They're always asking, can we sign a petition? There's no petition running now, but there are various battles still to be won or at Callan Park and issues underway there, like the plastic grass, which Friends of Callan Park are very concerned about plastic grass being proposed to be installed in two sporting fields there, and the impact that will have. But the reuse of the buildings and I think community from Jack Mundy working with the Housewives of Hunters Hill across the community there that is community. You need it for every aspect. Heritage and history, open space, hospitals, whatever.
Roslyn, why do you think that preserving Callan Park is important? I mean, we want it there for future generations, but why do you think that is important to preserve a space like Callan Park?
Well, it's a very densely populated area, but even if it wasn't, it's still an open green space. And there's no way you can just suddenly decide between here and the CBD, well, let's find 61 hectares, tear down all those houses and build a park. It's just never going to happen. And the fact that it has such vegetation, and you talked about the nooks and crannies. Yeah. Every time you go, you see something different.
Yeah, you find something new.
And the trees are always... There's more tree species in Callan Park than there are in Central Park, New York, which I think is an amazing... There's 108 jacarandas. There's about 20 hoop pines, about 20 bunyas. So, you don't... Where else can you go and suddenly find those magnificent trees from that colonial era that are mature and grand, and the discoveries of those things for children to just come across in an informal way?
Yeah, it's amazing.
You can't overestimate the value of that.
And as Sydney builds up, because there is a need for more homes, places like Callan Park are going to become even more important as the green lungs of Sydney, and a place where people can relax and experience nature.
And I guess especially there's probably going to be, we're going to have more and more high-rise. We haven't got space, so we have to go up. So people aren't going to have a backyard. They're going to have just maybe a small little balcony. So those green spaces like Callan Park, are going to be even more important. So, awareness about the site's history and its significance. But, why do you think it's really important that people come and participate in these tours?
Well, it's really, really crucial, Natalie, because once upon a time, Callan Park was a famous and infamous place. And I remember going to a fish and chip shop in Ballina, and I thought, oh, my God, Callan Park's following me, because the woman threatened the girl working with her. She'd send her to Callan Park.
Oh,
now,
wow.
This was only a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
But it was a place of threat and very well known in the community. Since it closed in 2008, the history of it has sort of drifted away, and that's why it's really crucial as part of the work that Friends of Callan Park do, that we do tours, we do seminars, we do exhibitions. We just did our 9th exhibition last year. We do the publications which come from the exhibitions. So I think as part of telling people what Callan Park was and is, as well as what it could be, I think it's not a bald sight, and you really need to understand, you don't have to understand the whole lot, but to understand something of its history. So I think there's room for lots of aspects of its history, and hence Heather's tour, which she's doing as a fundraiser next weekend for Friends of Callan Park. We're delighted to say thank you.
No problem at all. It's my pleasure. I absolutely love giving those tours. It's such a good way to bring people together and bring the history of a place to life, and it gives you new ways to engage with the place as well, and a new appreciation for it.
Yeah, it's an amazing space, and it's, a lot of people will probably go on their evening walk or their evening jog, and they'll have no idea about the history of the park. So I think it's a great way to make people aware that, it's a great space, but there is a history about it. I think it's important to know, the good and the bad, things that have gone on, and things that happened there. What are you most proud of about Friends of Callan Park?
Well, I think we've endured. We're still here. It's been identified as a landscape at risk by the Australian Garden History Society, and it still is a landscape at risk in some ways. But we defeated that first ambition to sell off parts of Callan Park. It's like selling the family silver. Would anybody consider selling off part of the Botanic Gardens? It would be anathema to anybody. So we defeated that plan to introduce 1,200 home sites. To that, we overturned the University of Sydney's plan to build accommodation for thousands of students in 2007, just after the Callan Park legislation, which we got through in 2002, when the local MP, Sandra Norrie, said Callan Park would be protected forever. And yet within 2 years, the government wanted to bring in a whole lot of essential services on the site, which would have destroyed that tranquility and taken up some of that open space. So the Callan Park Act is really significant because it prevents any construction of buildings outside the footprint and the envelope, the shape of the building that was there in 2002. So you can't just decide, well, I'll just move all those buildings here.
Put them somewhere else.
And people regard that as an obstacle, a burden. But actually, it's not an obstacle or a burden. It's a guide. If you want to do the right thing by Callan Park, it's a guide.
What are your goals and projects at the moment that are important?
Well, we're very pleased to be able to work with the Greater Sydney Parklands, which is a new agency that's been created to look after a number of historic sites, including Callan Park. So we want to work with them. We've always wanted to work with the government since we were first formed, but we're pleased to be able to work with the Greater Sydney Parklands and to have a conversation with them about how to progress Callan Park. We're not always on the same playing field, but I think when you can have a conversation, that's part of the ambition. We're continuing to do our tours, continuing to do publications. There's a number of publications in the pipeline. And that all takes time as a volunteer agency or organisation. And we're also concerned most about the proposed installation of plastic grass at Callan Park, which is a big environmental risk.
Yeah, of course.
Callan Park and Marrickville Golf Course are the two places identified by the Inner West Council as a biodiversity refuge. So you can't have a biodiversity refuge and then turn it into a sporting mecca.
Yeah, an environmental sort of risk.
I know there's so many adverse effects from artificial turf, and don't forget these are being put on heritage listed playing fields as well that front up to the harbour, so you get rain runoff, you get microplastics in the water. There's all of that stuff to consider when you're thinking, well, let's just do some whole-scale change to this heritage listed site.
Roslyn, how can people get involved? I mean, how can people help? How can the community, people who are just wandering through the park, I mean, is there a way that they can get involved in supporting what Friends of Callan Park do?
Sure. We have monthly meetings the first Monday of every month. Like us on Facebook. It's really important for people to get involved right now because there's a plan of management that's about to be released by the Greater Sydney Parkland. So that's a recipe, as it were, for how to manage Callan Park and set the standards of care. So that's going to be on public exhibition in a couple of months. I'm not sure exactly the deadline. But even to join up, and Friends of Callan Park is focp.admin@gmail.com. If they just Google Friends of Callan Park and just join the database and know what the issues are, even if people can't come along to a meeting. I think that's really important, to know what the issues are. People care very deeply about Callan Park and write to us constantly out of the blue. What's happening here? What's happening there? I don't like this. I like what you're doing there. They don't dislike what we're doing, mostly, but they dislike what the government might propose. So it's really important to keep informed.
Brilliant.
And there's a lot of other things like bush care that you have. You have a bush care programme that people can get involved with as well.
That's not ours, but no, it's there. No, in Glover's Garden, there are a range of
community gardens.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to get. Park isn't just its recent history of it being asylum and the other things that it's been. I mean, it does have a history that goes well back, and sort of a First Nations history. Is there anything about that you can tell us, any interesting sort of stories?
Sure. No, I think more could be done about that history. Callan Point, which is on the foreshore of Callan Park, really is essentially a midden. There's shell material that still you can come across today. There's a midden right on the beach there where the roof has fallen in, I'm glad to say, so people can't destroy it. But all along the foreshore of Iron Cove, as late as 1888, 40 years after white settlement, there was an edict issued that you'd be fined £5 if you took any shell material. There were 50 men strong convict gangs working collecting that shell material. So I don't think we have any real concept of the extent of the feasting that must have gone on there along those waterfront areas. There are some carvings on the rocks at Callan Point, but some of those have been marked over by later drawings and boats and mermaids. But there's some people who suggest that some of those carvings could have been originally indigenous carvings of whales and so on. So I think there's a lot more that could be discovered about that.
About the park that we don't sort of realise. I mean, Heather, in your sort of research for your dark tales and your walk, have you sort of come across any, stories or about that history as well, or?
Only in outline. As Roslyn said, it's a history that has yet to be uncovered, just as so much has yet to be uncovered about Callan Park. And it's really about preserving this place for the lungs of Sydney and for the future of Sydney, and to anchor ourselves with the heritage of Sydney as well. So there's a lot of different angles there. The only Indigenous story I've really come across was the man who built the Harbour Bridge monument. So he was he was an Indigenous man. He fought in World War I. Okay. He ended up in the repatriation wing. I'm trying to think of his name.
You're going well, Douglas Grant.
It'll come Grant, and he built a scale model. Can you believe this? Of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and he built it and opened it up quicker than the actual building that was underway in the harbour of the Harbour Bridge. So there's little Easter eggs all over that site. It's incredible.
It's amazing. Now, and I know, Roslyn, you've actually written some, you're an author, you've written some books about Callan Park and its history and sort of, various things about Callan Park. Tell us about some of those books. I mean, and where can people get copies of those books that you have written?
Well, these have all come about through exhibitions that we've had, and there's been such a response. The exhibitions have gone up on corflutes, and there have been temporary exhibitions outside. So people have been really thrilled and said, well, where can we find this? So we've converted those panels into books, and they can be bought from Friends of Callan Park at a very modest cost. We use those as part of our advocacy as well. We give them to politicians. I'm sure every politician we've given one to has read it cover to cover, knows it intimately. But we were thrilled last year for the last exhibition and the last book we produced about the veterans that Minister Harris, David Harris, the Minister for Veterans, actually took the time and trouble to come out to Callan Park, walk around the exhibition.
That's great.
With the site and with the president of the RSL. So we were really, really thrilled at him doing that. So that's another avenue of the Friends of Callan Park's advocacy, to get the message out there and just remind people, as Heather says, what a fantastic, historic, heritage, significant, remarkable, unique place it is.
Roslyn, if there's one thing that we've had a great discussion about Callan Park. If there's one thing that you want people to remember about Callan Park, or to think, is there a message that you want to get across to people about, Callan Park?
There are so many, but it's significant, it's remarkable, it's heritage, it's there. Know about it, learn about it, come and visit it, and respect the place and its history.
And if people want to, let's remind people, if people want to sort of get in touch and become part of the Friends of Callan Park, how can they get in touch with you guys?
Just Google Friends of Callan Park, focp.admin@gmail.com. We have a website. Like us on Facebook. We've taken baby steps on Instagram, but that's going to surge along. Just look it up and come along. Everyone is welcome.
Amazing, amazing.